Did you miss the classic movies from the 80s and 90s? Are you curious what all the hype was about? Or do you just love discovering great movies that you never knew existed? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jay, and this is Back to the Flix, a film nostalgia channel dedicated to the 80s and 90s movies where classics were born. Today, I'm reviewing 1990's Darkman, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Liam Neeson. This movie is violent, weird, funny, and completely over the top. I'm gonna have some fun with the madness as I break down how this movie turns revenge, violence, and comic book chaos into one of the wildest rides of the early 90s. So grab your popcorn, your snacks, and your drinks, and let's get back to the flicks.
Let's take a trip down memory lane. So hop in the whip, let's ride the wave. Destination set where classics were born. So kick up your feet and grab the popcorn. Blockbuster movies that swept the nation. Hit the like, subscribe, and notification.
The movie opens inside a grimy warehouse where Eddie Black is on the phone trying to sort out business problems while surrounded by his crew. That problem gets a lot worse when Robert Durant arrives with his men. From the conversation, it's clear Durant is trying to muscle in on Eddie Black's territory. At first, Eddie's crew seems to gain the upper hand when Durant's men are forced to hand over an absurd amount of weapons. But that changes fast. One of Durant's henchmen removes his leg, revealing it to be a hidden machine gun, and the whole standoff explodes into chaos. Bullets start flying, cars tear through the factory, and Eddie Black's crew is wiped out in no time. Then Durant moves in on Eddie Black himself and uses a cigar cutter to clip off his fingers one by one. It's gruesome, insane, and the perfect introduction to the kind of movie Darkman is about to be.
Hey, we're here. And this movie wastes no time, absolutely none, at telling us what kind of movie we're in right now. Darkman doesn't ease into the madness, it kicks the door open. This movie is beautifully unhinged. This movie lives off of comic book nonsense. Eddie Black's crew comes out and the dude is swinging the nunchucks like, come on, man. Sometimes extra is gonna extra. A little bit too extra. I don't know if it was me just having to watch this movie a few times to edit it, but seeing the ridiculous amount of weapons they took off of Durant's crew, and still Black's crew got taken down so easily. You watch it in slow motion, you see they had 2 weapons against an entire crew of bad guys. And how do you sign up to be a henchman? That's what who's signing up to be a henchman. What's the healthcare plan? And if you watch my recent review of Swamp Thing, you'll notice something here. The actor Nicholas Worth, who played Bruno in the Swamp Thing, plays the character Paulie here. This initial start sequence is Sam Raimi's way of saying, hey, don't really take this movie too seriously. It's so exaggerated, theatrical, and excessive that it plays towards the comedy if you got that type of sense of humor. And that's what I think makes this movie so fun.
After that opening, the movie shifts to Peyton Westlake's lab, where he's developing facial replication technology that can turn images into lifelike synthetic faces. Working with his lab assistant Yakatito, Peyton keeps running into the same problem. The cells won't stay stable for longer than 99 minutes. Upstairs in his apartment, Peyton and Julie talk briefly about his work before sharing a quiet, intimate moment. The next morning, Julie is on the phone with Herb about the von Hindenstein deal. She's found information she clearly wasn't supposed to find, and it looks like members of the zoning commission connected to the project are being paid off. Before accusing anyone directly, she wants to confront Louis Strack. While bringing her coffee, Peyton accidentally leaves a noticeable coffee ring on the top left corner of the evidence paperwork. Then, as Julie is leaving for work, Peyton tells her they're already doing everything together anyway, so maybe it's time they get married. Julie doesn't say yes, but she tells him she'll think about it.
What I like about this sequence is how Darkman goes from straight gangland lunacy to this weird, almost sweet science romance setup. It's 2 totally different movies. One minute you got a guy getting his fingers clipped off, and then next you got Peyton in the lab trying to make fake skin like it's the most normal thing in the world. And Liam Neeson is playing Peyton as the everyman. He's super intelligent, but he's awkward, he's buried in his work, and he's trying to solve this one problem that keeps beating him. And that 99-minute limit is one of those great comic book movie details, where we just know that that number is gonna matter throughout the movie. And them continuously zooming in on that coffee ring on a piece of paper lets us know that that's a key point as well.
Julie meets Louis Strack in his office and tells him she's found a memo with some very questionable items addressed to a Mr. Belisarius. Strack doesn't deny it. He flat out says the payments were payoffs, but argues that the project is bigger than that now, and that even if the payoffs were distasteful, they were necessary. He also brings up Robert Durant, tying him to drugs, racketeering, and real estate, and warns Julie that this is a dangerous man. Back at Peyton's lab, he and Yakatito are still struggling to stabilize the cells. But when the equipment overloads the power and the lights go out, Peyton notices the cells are still holding past 99 minutes. That's when he realizes the answer. The synthetic cells are vulnerable to light. In the dark, they remain stable. But before they can build on that breakthrough, Durant's goons storm the lab and violently take over. They demand the Belisarius Memorandum, but Peyton has no idea what they're talking about. That only gets him and Yakatito beaten even more. Rick shoots Yakatito in the head, and Peyton is tortured with his own lab equipment, leaving him horribly disfigured. Then Durant's men rig the place to blow and leave Peyton there to die. Barely able to move, Peyton tries to reach the explosives. Outside, Julie arrives, still thinking about Peyton's marriage proposal. Before she can get to him, the lab explodes and Peyton is launched out into the water below in a ball of fire.
So what's the first thing you would do if in your professional life you found out that somebody you were dealing with was doing something criminal? Would you take that to a higher authority or would you go approach them yourself? I guess Julie just decided she was going to approach Strack herself. And people tend not to take that too lightly once you tell them you actually know what they're doing is illegal. And Strack doesn't even attempt to act like he's innocent. He's not even going to try to argue the morality of the whole situation. He's talking about the scale of it. This deal is too big, so whatever dirt he has to get himself into, he's down for it. And Peyton and Yakatito's discovery couldn't have came at a worse time. And here's a key point. When you're in a movie, don't talk about big things you want to do in the near future because you're probably going to end up on some mortician's slab somewhere. But Peyton and Yakatito figure out that dark is the answer. The skin cells are photosensitive, so when you put them in a dark environment, they last longer. And Durant's attack on this lab is pure Darkman excess. Violent, nasty, and way over the top. And this movie giving us the scene in the way it did makes the revenge payoffs later in the movie so much better. And Julie walks up thinking about whether or not she's actually going to say yes to Peyton. And as soon as she does, that idea goes out the window. Literally.
The movie cuts from Julie standing outside the explosion to her standing at Peyton's gravesite. Nearby, the gravedigger tells the limo driver the burial didn't take long because all they found was an ear. Across town, hospital staff in the burn unit discuss the unidentified body pulled from the harbor. They assume he's homeless and describe him as having burns over 40% of his body. They also explain that part of his spine was severed to stop him from feeling intense pain, and one of them actually sticks him with a pin to prove it. According to the staff, without pain or normal sensory response, his mind becomes unstable, making him vulnerable to rage, extreme emotion, and increased strength. Soon after they leave, Peyton wakes up. The movie then takes us through a chaotic visual trip inside his mind as he processes the trauma and damage that's been done to him. He escapes through the hospital window. Later, in a rainy alley, Peyton pulls clothes from a dumpster and makes his way to Julie's apartment. He arrives just as she is walking in, but when he approaches her, his grotesque appearance terrifies her.
If I read you from text that last segment, you would think it was one of the most tragic stories ever. But the way Raimi shot this is just hilarious. The zoom-ins, the camera swipes, and the timing and pacing of all the cuts just make it all over dramatic and hilarious. And the swipe from Julie standing outside of the explosion to directly she's at the gravesite, and then the gravedigger talking about all they found was an ear. Don't take this movie seriously. Enjoy yourself. They're having fun with it, and so should we. And then we get to the hospital scene where the doctor's talking all these medical terms about how they've severed a part of his spine so he can't feel pain and he's going to be emotionally and then she sticks him with a needle through the bandages. Whatever happened to the Hippocratic Oath, man? This is hilarious. This is the type of madness you will find in a city like Gotham. But you also have to respect how they do the quick Darkman setup. He can't feel pain, he's strong, and he has no identity, so he can kind of become whoever he wants to be. And any chaotic or strange behavior he does can be seen as normal because his condition has made him that way.
What follows is a montage of Peyton adjusting to what's left of his life. We see him in the alley, and the movie gives us a drain visual that suggests his old life has gone right down with it. He moves through the wreckage of his destroyed lab, looking over his equipment and everything that was lost. Then he finds a mirror and finally sees the damage done to his own face. Instead of stopping, Peyton goes back to work. Using a partially burned image, he begins trying to reconstruct his own face and keep improving the synthetic skin process. At one point, he accidentally sets his hand on fire and realizes he can't feel the pain. The movie then shifts to Julie at the Strack Industries view of the future ball, where she and Strack are still talking about the memorandum. Strack tells her that the cure for her grief is to have a dance. From above, Peyton is watching. When he spots Durant and Rick, violent flashes of what they did to him run through his mind. Peyton catches Rick outside, drags him into the sewers, and tortures him for information. Rick confirms that Durant is behind everything. But even after getting what he wants, Peyton shows no mercy because Rick is the man who shot Yakatito. Peyton holds Rick's head up through a sewer grate until an 18-wheeler ends him.
This segment is a beautiful redefinition of Peyton's self-image. First, we see him watching his life go down the drain. Then we see his love being taken away. Then we get to see his first step towards revenge as he starts trying to put the pieces back together. He's an unstable, improvisational, sewer-dwelling Avenger who's rebuilding himself with scraps, rage, and science. And that mirror segment lets us know that Peyton realizes that his life can no longer be normal. And just as soon as he's come to grips with that, it's like, all right, back to the lab. And what I can't really understand is why Julie's putting herself into these situations. She knows that Strack is corrupt, and yet she's still hobnobbing with him like everything is fine. The movie doesn't really tell us how much time has gone between the explosion and now, but she's a little bit too close to Strack for my comfort. And Peyton doing the groundhog with Rick out of that manhole cover was hilarious. The practical effects on that dummy have stuck with me since the first time I saw this movie as a kid. And this is one of the first steps in Peyton locking into that Darkman persona.
Now Peyton starts using his disguise technology. He tails Durant's henchman Paulie, gathering photographic reference and studying him closely. Back at the lab, Peyton creates realistic replicas of Paulie's face and hands. He sneaks into Paulie's apartment, knocks him out with chemicals, and reveals that he now looks exactly like him. Disguised as Paulie, Peyton goes to the money drop. He's a little clumsy, but he convinces Durant's other men that he is Paulie and takes the money. Later that morning, the missing money and a suitcase with airline tickets are enough for Durant to assume Paulie betrayed him. Durant throws the real Paulie out the window, killing him on impact. Peyton witnesses it all as a woman sees Paulie's body on a car, and Peyton, still disguised as Paulie, walking away. That night, Peyton sits beside gargoyles on a rooftop, questioning what he has become. Back in the lab, he continues his work, but his emotions boil over, and he starts tearing up the space around him with a pipe. Then a buzzer goes off. His own self-image has finally been completed by the skin-duplicating process.
This is where Darkman really starts becoming the movie that people remember, because Peyton isn't just a burnt-up man hiding in the shadows. He's turning into this shape-shifting, emotionally unstable, one-man infiltration machine. And the Paulie disguise stuff is a huge part of the fun here. And I like that he's a little clumsy with it. He's not this perfect master of deception. He's learning as he goes, and that's what makes this better. It keeps the scene tense, but also gives us that slightly off-balance energy, like you feel like the whole thing could fall apart at any moment. And Durant with the line, "Have a nice flight," after finding Paulie's airline tickets, is another one of those moments where the movie is so over the top it circles back to being funny. Durant doesn't do any investigation, he doesn't ask any follow-up questions. He just goes straight mob boss and tosses this man out the window. And that beautiful anti-hero scene of Peyton sitting on top of the roof with the gargoyles on each side, that's a scene pulled straight from a comic book. And that last sequence lets us know that Durant and his crew aren't the only things Peyton is dealing with. He's got a huge internal conflict. Before, he never really was the person to harm somebody like this, but the more he does these things, he's realizing he's changing on the inside, and what he becomes in the end might be just as gruesome as how he appears on the outside.
The next morning, Peyton approaches Julie at his own gravesite wearing a synthetic version of his old face. At first, she can't believe what she's seeing, but Peyton quickly convinces her that he is who he says he is. He tells her he's been in a coma, dealing with internal injuries, and that he stayed away because he was afraid she wouldn't want him. Julie is overwhelmed but relieved, and for a moment it feels like they can pick up where they left off. Later that night, Durant is at home doing taxidermy while talking business on the phone. He threatens a man named Hung Fat, saying if he doesn't get on the program, he'll be added to Durant's collection. That collection turns out to be a velvet-lined wooden box filled with fingers Durant has clipped off and preserved. Outside, Peyton listens in. Back at the lab, Peyton creates a Durant mask and uses it to rob a convenience store, setting Durant up. The next morning, Peyton, still disguised as Durant, goes to the meeting with Hung Fat and convinces everyone that he is the real Robert G. Durant. Using his ability to ignore pain, he forces Hung Fat to give in. But then the real Durant arrives. The two Robert G. Durants come face to face in the revolving doors, leaving Durant's men completely confused. Peyton almost gets away with it, but his synthetic skin starts to degrade, exposing him and forcing him to escape gunfire from Durant and his men.
Here, with Peyton rolling up to Julie in the graveside as she's mourning his death, should play a little bit more over the top, but the actors do a really good job in grounding this scene and making it feel a little bit more realistic. And his excuse for being away was kind of valid. Then we cut to Durant and realize how crazed this individual actually is. This man has a problem. He's got a finger fetish. So we've gone from this emotional, beautiful reconnection scene to an inside glimpse of this over-the-wall character. Then we've got Peyton also doing his job, doing a little research, getting a little background on the character. And his setup for Durant was almost perfect, except for Peyton's setup crime didn't really give him enough time to do what he needed to do. Peyton actually stumbled through the entire Hung Fet interaction, and with a little clever thinking, he almost came out with it unscathed. And you gotta remember that back in the 90s, having two of the same character on screen at the same time was mind-blowing. There were quite a few movies that used this camera technique as their whole claim to fame, and Peyton's synthetic skin always manages to fail at the worst possible time. Every plan he has a timer on it, which makes the disguise scenes a lot more fun because you always know that disaster is right around the corner.
After that fiasco, Durant knows someone out there can impersonate people. But the next day, Peyton is at the carnival with Julie, trying to enjoy time with her. He explains that the experiment and the explosion changed him and tells her his time is limited because he's still doing rehabilitation at the hospital. All around them, the carnival creates a bright, distorted backdrop that matches the turmoil inside Peyton's mind. Things go bad when Peyton wins one of the games, and the operator tries to cheat him. The man makes it worse by putting his hands on Peyton's chest. Peyton grabs his fingers and twists them, and the moment turns horrifying for Peyton, Julie, and the operator all at once. As Peyton's face starts bubbling, he runs off, but not before handing Julie one of the pink stuffed prizes he won. Julie follows him back to his hideout. Inside, she sees the Peyton mask on the table and realizes there is far more to his story than he told her.
This carnival scene is designed to make everyone feel 100% uncomfortable. The camera zooms, the lighting, the distorted lens, all done subconsciously to make us feel uneasy. Even while on the surface it looks like Peyton and Julie are trying to have a good time, this man is a ticking time bomb ready to go off at any minute. And it seems that everything the camera shows us is a reminder how unstable and fragile this man is on the inside. And showing us that freak show guy in the plaid shirt, is that supposed to be a gimmick in the carnival? Is that a real person? What's the whole story behind that, man? That's a whole nother movie in itself. And the part of the movie where the booth operator is trying to scam him goes from uncomfortable to a full-blown nightmare in 2 seconds. And the fact that all three of them screamed when he grabbed his fingers and twisted them back was hilarious. I think all of them were equally shocked. And once again, at the worst possible time, Peyton's skin starts to break down. And this is another moment in the movie where you're not really supposed to ask questions. How far is Peyton's hideout from this carnival? And did Julie really chase him the entire way? And also, why was Peyton crying like that when he went into his lab? This whole section takes something as harmless as a carnival date and turns it into an emotional breakdown, body horror, relationship collapse. And this is exactly the kind of over-the-top blend this movie does so well.
That evening, Julie meets Louis Strack in his office and tells him that whatever relationship was starting between them is over. When the phone rings, Strack steps away, leaving Julie alone at his desk. That's when she sees the same coffee-stained Belisarius memorandum sitting there. When Strack catches her holding it, he stops pretending. He tells Julie that Peyton's lab was destroyed because of him and that he needed it done so his project could move forward. He also tells her the police won't help because they're being paid off too. Strack lets her leave unharmed, seemingly because he doesn't think she's a real threat. But when Durant arrives, he tells Strack the new problem. Julie knows too much, and Peyton Westlake is still alive. Durant follows Julie straight back to Peyton's hideout, and his men immediately attack the facility. Peyton, now in his full Darkman disguise of trenchcoat, fedora, and bandaged face, escapes to the roof, while Durant fires grenade launchers at him. Durant's men think they have Peyton cornered when they move into another room of the factory, but Peyton gets back to his equipment and turns the tables. He disguises one of Durant's men as another henchman. Then, when that man pulls off what he thinks is a disguise and sees Peyton's face underneath, he empties his gun into the body. He doesn't realize Peyton layered the trick and that he has actually killed one of his own men. Peyton then walks up to Smiley looking exactly like him and takes him out.
Julie. Not only did Julie first find out that Strack was corrupt, she started associating with him more. After what she thought was the death of her long-term boyfriend dying in a horrible lab experiment, she instantly starts getting close to the guy she knows is a criminal. And even after knowing he has ties with Durant, she goes to break it off with him. But hey, every box isn't full of bright bulbs. And Strack doubles down on that explosion, letting Julie know that it was because of him that happened. And once Durant realizes that Peyton is alive, he wastes no time. He calls his goons and follows Julie immediately, right back to Peyton's hideout. And this is where we get our first glimpse of Darkman, that anti-hero comic book vigilante. And it's at this point I think they're just saying, let's see how far we can push all this. Firing a grenade launcher from a helicopter at a man running across rooftops? Yeah, that sounds about right. But the best part about this is Peyton probably realizes that they know he can imitate people. So him tossing one of the goons out in a mask, only for at that point to be revealed that it's another mask underneath, is kind of genius.
Peyton makes his way back to the rooftop to finish things with Durant, who is still up there with a grenade launcher. Down below, Smiley wakes up and finds what looks like the same explosive setup used to blow Peyton up at the beginning of the movie. He rushes to disarm it, but it turns out to be a hologram. Above the warehouse, Peyton has made it onto Durant's helicopter as it takes off. He manages to take out one of Durant's men in the air. Below them, the facility explodes. During the fight, Durant pulls off Peyton's mask and knocks him off the helicopter, but Peyton ends up hanging from a hook beneath it. What follows is a death-defying ride through the city, as Peyton is dragged beneath Durant's helicopter through buildings and traffic. Then Peyton manages to hook the cable onto a moving 18-wheeler, pulling the helicopter into a concrete overpass, and finally ending Robert G. Durant.
Peyton using that same bomb setup that took him out in the beginning of the movie is just poetic justice. And adding the hologram element makes it that much sweeter. And this is where the movie is like, let's go big or go home. We've got now Darkman hanging from a helicopter being swung through the city, being pursued by a police helicopter. So they said, let's skip the car chase, let's do a helicopter chase. Let's throw this man into buildings and into traffic. And I have no idea what that railing on top of that 18-wheeler was, but using that cable to pull Durant into the overpass was beautiful. This is the kind of way a villain of his caliber needs to be taken out. So this whole stretch is a pure payoff. Peyton outsmarts them, he survives the impossible, and Durant gets a death scene worthy of how over the top he's been the entire movie.
Later that night, outside a construction site, Strack has Julie hostage as he meets with who he believes is Durant. But it's really Peyton in disguise. As Strack, Julie, and Peyton ride the elevator up, they step out onto exposed I-beams with nothing below them but a 650-foot drop. At first, Peyton seems to have the advantage. But then Strack catches a detail that doesn't add up. Durant didn't have any kids, and that is enough for Strack to realize this is not the real Robert G. Durant. He rips the mask off Peyton, exposing his grotesque face. In that moment, Strack fully reveals himself as the true mastermind and the real villain behind all of this. He even offers Peyton a place at his side, saying he'll give him Julie as a consolation prize. Strack turns his back for a moment, and Peyton attacks. At the same time, one of Strack's men throws Julie over the edge, but her handcuffs catch on rebar below. Peyton and Strack fight hand-to-hand across the I-beams, while Strack's henchmen swing cables at Peyton. One henchman gets caught up in the cable himself, and Peyton uses it to send him down to the ground below. Then Strack grabs a nail gun and shoots Peyton through the hand, pinning it to a vertical I-beam. As Strack torments him, Peyton's rage takes over. He rips his hand free, knocks Strack down, and swings out just in time to catch Julie as she falls from the rebar. After moving her to safety, Peyton goes after Strack, kicks him from the beam, and catches him by the ankle. For a moment, Strack hangs there with his life in Peyton's hand. Then Peyton lets go, dropping him to his death. On the elevator ride down, Peyton tells Julie that he hasn't only changed on the outside, he's changed on the inside too. Even though Julie wants the life they had before, Peyton knows he can't go back to it. He walks away, puts on another face, and disappears into the crowd. Julie chases after him, grabbing strangers, hoping one of them is Peyton, but he is already gone. As he looks back at her from behind a face she doesn't recognize, he walks off and says that now his name is Darkman.
Up until this point, Durant has been the loudest villain, the weirdest, the most violent, and the most memorable. But this finale reminds us that Strack was the real poison in the system the entire time, and Peyton gets exposed for one tiny detail. He didn't do enough research. All the technology, all the disguises, and all this planning, and the thing that cracks it is basic human knowledge. And what better setup for the final showdown of a movie like this than the skeleton of a high-rise? Steel beams, huge drops, swinging cables, nail guns. This movie does not want a quiet ending. And throughout most of this sequence, Darkman is not winning. We've got to remember that this guy was just a scientist not too long ago. But Strack, on the other hand, seems like he's running off of pure evil. This man has no morals and no compassion, and he's not holding back. In that moment where Strack is verbally antagonizing Peyton and he realizes he's no longer that man, he finally takes on the full Darkman persona, ripping his hand through that bolt, saving Julie, and then knocking Strack off the side of the building, only to take Strack's life in the palm of his hand, literally. And even at that point, Strack just couldn't let it go, so Darkman had to. And this is yet another movie where the hero doesn't win. Even though he takes out the bad guy, his life is forever changed. And that final line that he speaks works because he's earned it. He's not Peyton Westlake anymore. He's Darkman. Darkman is that kind of movie that only gets more entertaining the more you sit with it. It's wild, messy, and creative, and completely committed to its own madness. And that's exactly why it works. For all the chaos, explosions, and disguise tricks, Darkman still stands out because it never feels ordinary. It's got comic book energy, monster movie tragedy, and just enough logical nonsense to make it unforgettable. So if you like this review, be sure to check out my others. Hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell, and share this with somebody who loves retro reviews. Again, I'm Jay, and I'll see you next time when we get back to the flicks.
We're going back to the flicks, rewind the mix. 80s flicks, family ties to the Netflix fix. Reliving those days with the little ones amazed in this retro wave. Old classics paved the way. Back to the flicks, rewind the mix. 80s flicks, family ties to the Netflix fix. Reliving those days with the little ones amazed in this retro wave. Old classics paved the way.